The chief executive of one of America's most powerful newspapers has resigned in disgrace. Will Lewis, the publisher and CEO of the Washington Post, stepped down on Saturday afternoon, just 3 days after laying off one-third of the newspaper's staff. His departure caps a tumultuous 2-year tenure marked by broken promises, ethical scandals, and what the Newsroom union is calling the attempted destruction of a great American journalism institution. And the most shocking part? While his employees were getting termination emails on Wednesday, Lewis was walking a red carpet at a glitzy Super Bowl party in San Francisco, smiling for cameras as if nothing was wrong. This is the Washington Post, the newspaper that brought down a president, the outlet that exposed the Watergate scandal and forced Richard Nixon to resign, the institution that has won dozens of Pulitzer Prizes and has been a cornerstone of American journalism for over a century. And now, under the ownership of billionaire Jeff Bezos, it is collapsing from within. More than 300 journalists lost their jobs on Wednesday in brutal fashion, receiving impersonal emails while their CEO partied on the West Coast. The entire Middle East bureau was eliminated. A war correspondent covering Ukraine was fired while she was literally in a war zone. The sports desk was shut down entirely. And through it all, Will Lewis was nowhere to be found. On Saturday evening, Lewis sent a brief resignation note to staff, claiming that after 2 years of transformation, now is the right time for me to step aside. He thanked Jeff Bezos for his support and said difficult decisions had been necessary to ensure the Post's sustainable future, but the newsroom is not buying it. Journalists openly celebrated his departure on social media. The Washington Post Guild, the union representing staff, issued a scathing statement saying his legacy will be the attempted destruction of a great American journalism institution. And for the first time since the layoffs, Jeff Bezos himself broke his silence, releasing a statement that notably did not mention Lewis even once. The layoffs that triggered this meltdown occurred on Wednesday morning during a Zoom call led by executive editor Matt Murray. Lewis did not appear on the call. He did not send an email. He did not address the staff in any form. According to multiple media reports, he was completely absent as his employees learned their careers were over. The cuts were sweeping and devastating. Roughly one-third of the newsroom was eliminated, taking the Post from approximately 900 journalists down to around 600. Among those fired were Pulitzer Prize winners, veteran correspondents, and reporters who had dedicated decades to the institution. The international desk was decimated. The Post's entire Middle East team, which had been covering critical conflicts in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, was wiped out. The Ukraine bureau chief and another war correspondent were let go. One of those correspondents posted on social media that she received her termination email while she was actively reporting from a war zone, dodging artillery fire to tell stories that matter. The sports section was completely shut down. Decades of sports journalism at the Post came to an abrupt end. The local news staff, which had covered Washington, D.C. and its suburbs with more than 40 reporters, was reduced to about a dozen. Executive editor Matt Murray told staffers during the Zoom call that he hoped the Post would maintain a presence in 12 locations around the globe. But according to 4 people with knowledge of the plans, that presence will rely heavily on local stringers, freelance journalists paid per story, rather than full-time correspondents with salaries and benefits. This represents a fundamental shift away from the Post's long-standing commitment to robust international coverage and deep investigative reporting. The timing of the layoffs added insult to injury. Wednesday's announcement came after weeks of anxiety and fear in the newsroom. Journalists had written letters directly to Jeff Bezos, the Post's owner and the founder of Amazon, pleading with him to spare the paper from cuts and help stabilize its finances. Bezos, one of the wealthiest people on the planet with a net worth in the hundreds of billions of dollars, did not respond to those appeals. Instead, the layoffs proceeded as planned, and Bezos remained silent until Saturday, when he issued a brief statement about Lewis's departure that made no mention of the man who had just led the purge. Will Lewis's absence during the layoffs became a major point of outrage. While his employees were absorbing life-changing news, Lewis was photographed on Thursday evening in San Francisco at the NFL Honors Event, a star-studded Super Bowl week party attended by athletes, celebrities, and corporate executives. He walked the red carpet in a suit, posed for photos, and mingled with the elite. Images of Lewis at the event circulated on social media, juxtaposed with screenshots of termination emails sent to Post journalists. The optics were catastrophic. A CEO who could not face his staff but could attend a luxury party less than 24 hours later. Lewis's tenure at the Post had been controversial from the very beginning. He was hired in November 2023 by Jeff Bezos with a mandate to turn around the newspaper's struggling business. The Post had been losing tens of millions of dollars annually, and subscriber numbers had been declining. Lewis came with an impressive resume. He had served as publisher of the Wall Street Journal from 2014 to 2020, a period during which the journal found strong financial footing behind its paywall. Before that, he had worked as a senior executive in Rupert Murdoch's media empire, including roles at the Daily Telegraph in London and News Corporation in the United States. But Lewis arrived with baggage. In December 2023, just weeks after he took the job, NPR reported that Lewis had been accused of involvement in efforts to cover up aspects of the phone hacking scandal that rocked Murdoch's UK tabloids in the early 2010s. The scandal involved journalists at News of the World and other Murdoch publications illegally hacking into the voicemails of celebrities, politicians, crime victims, and even the families of dead British soldiers. Lewis had been a senior executive at News International during that period, and allegations surfaced that he played a role in suppressing information about the extent of the hacking. Lewis denied any wrongdoing, but months later, NPR reported another explosive detail. Lewis had attempted to kill the original NPR story by offering the outlet's reporter an exclusive interview in exchange for not publishing the phone hacking allegations. That revelation raised serious questions about Lewis's journalistic ethics. If the CEO of the Washington Post was willing to use access and interviews as leverage to suppress negative coverage about himself, what did that say about his respect for the principles of a free press? The situation worsened in June 2024 when Lewis tried to bring in Robert Winnett, a former colleague from his days in British journalism, as the Post's top editor. Winnett had been working at the Daily Telegraph, and Lewis wanted him to replace executive editor Sally Busby, who had been in the role since 2021. But before Winnett could start, reports emerged alleging that some of his past reporting had relied on fraudulently obtained records. The controversy became untenable, and Winnett eventually did not take the position. Sally Busby's departure itself was messy. In early June 2024, Busby abruptly resigned after Lewis announced plans to restructure the newsroom. The restructuring included splitting the newsroom into separate divisions for core news and a new unit focused on service journalism, opinion, and social media. The plan was widely seen as undermining the authority of the executive editor and centralizing power in Lewis's hands. Busby, a well-respected journalist who had previously led the Associated Press's global news operations, left rather than preside over what she viewed as a degradation of editorial independence. The newsroom's trust in Lewis cratered further when reports surfaced that he had attempted to suppress the Post's own coverage of the phone hacking allegations against him. According to journalists familiar with the situation, Lewis pressured editors to kill or water down stories about his past. He denied these allegations as well, but the damage was done. A publisher who would interfere with his own newspaper's reporting had lost the moral authority to lead an institution built on the principles of accountability and transparency. Throughout 2025, Lewis retreated from public view. He stopped holding regular meetings with the newsroom. He focused on the business side, attempting to court advertisers and develop new revenue streams through AI and technology products. But the financial bleeding continued. The Post kept losing money, and subscriber numbers kept falling. By the time 2026 arrived, the situation had become dire. A major factor in the Post's subscriber decline was a decision made in February 2025, reportedly driven by Jeff Bezos himself. Bezos ordered a change to the newspaper's editorial page, directing it to focus primarily on personal liberties and free markets. The revamp aligned with Bezos's own libertarian-leaning inclinations and was seen as less likely to yield criticism of President Donald Trump, who had returned to office in January 2025. The editorial page editor resigned in protest. The backlash was swift and severe. According to NPR, the Post lost more than 375,000 digital subscribers in the months following the editorial shift, a 15% decline in the paper's subscriber base. Readers who had supported the Post through subscriptions felt betrayed by what they saw as a politically motivated pivot designed to appease Trump and avoid regulatory scrutiny of Bezos's other business interests, particularly Amazon. Post journalists begged Lewis and Bezos not to hold the resulting financial losses against the newsroom. Those pleas were ignored. Marty Baron, the legendary former executive editor of the Post who had led the paper during the Trump administration's first term and had overseen its aggressive investigative reporting, issued a blistering statement after the layoffs were announced on Wednesday. Baron said the Post's challenges were made indefinitely worse by ill-conceived decisions that came from the very top. He did not name Lewis or Bezos explicitly, but the implication was clear. The people running the newspaper had made catastrophic strategic errors, and the journalists were paying the price. On Saturday evening, Lewis's resignation was announced in a terse note to staff. He wrote that his 2 years at the Post had been a period of transformation and that difficult decisions had been necessary to ensure the paper's sustainable future. He thanked Jeff Bezos for his support and leadership. The note was only a few sentences long and offered no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain caused by the layoffs, and no reflection on what had gone wrong. The Washington Post released a separate statement announcing that Jeff D'Onofrio would immediately take over as acting publisher and CEO. D'Onofrio had joined the Post as chief financial officer in June 2025. Before that, he had been an advertising executive and the CEO of Tumblr, the blogging and social media platform. He has no background in journalism and no experience running a newsroom. His appointment signals that the Post's leadership will continue to prioritize financial considerations over editorial values. For the first time since the layoffs, Jeff Bezos issued a public statement. It was brief and notably did not mention Will Lewis at all. "The Post has an essential journalistic mission and an extraordinary opportunity," Bezos said. "Each and every day, our readers give us a roadmap to success. The data tells us what is valuable and where to focus." He added that D'Onofrio, along with executive editor Matt Murray and opinion editor Adam O'Neill, are positioned to lead the Post into an exciting and thriving next chapter. The statement was remarkable for what it did not say. There was no acknowledgement of the 300 journalists who had just lost their jobs, no recognition of the Post's storied history or its role in American democracy, no reflection on what the paper's collapse might mean for the public's ability to hold power accountable. Instead, Bezos talked about data and roadmaps and exciting next chapters, as if the Post were just another business unit in his empire rather than a public trust with responsibilities that transcend profit margins. The Washington Post Guild responded to Lewis's departure with a statement of its own. "Will Lewis's exit is long overdue," the union said. "His legacy will be the attempted destruction of a great American journalism institution." The Guild called for transparency about the Post's financial situation and for a commitment from ownership to invest in journalism rather than continue cutting. The statement made clear that while Lewis was gone, the fundamental problems facing the Post remained. What those problems reveal is a broader crisis in American journalism. Local newspapers have been decimated over the past 2 decades as advertising revenue migrated to digital platforms like Google and Facebook. Even national outlets with significant resources like the Post have struggled to build sustainable business models. The Post's challenges were exacerbated by decisions made at the top, but they also reflect structural issues in the industry that no single CEO can solve. The irony is profound. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013 for $250 million, a relatively small sum for a man of his wealth. At the time, he was hailed as a savior who would use his resources and technological expertise to secure the Post's future. He hired talented editors, invested in digital infrastructure, and allowed the newsroom to grow. During the first Trump administration, the Post thrived, winning Pulitzer Prizes and gaining millions of subscribers who valued its aggressive coverage of the White House. But that growth proved unsustainable. When Trump left office in 2021, subscriber growth slowed, the Post's annual losses mounted, and rather than continuing to invest, Bezos began cutting. The editorial shift in February 2025 alienated the very readers who had fueled the Post's resurgence. The layoffs on Wednesday were the culmination of a death spiral that Bezos himself had set in motion. Will Lewis's resignation does not fix any of this. Jeff D'Onofrio may be a skilled financial manager, but he is not a journalist. He does not have the credibility or the expertise to lead a newsroom through a crisis of this magnitude. And the fundamental question remains unanswered. Is Jeff Bezos willing to invest in the Washington Post as a journalistic institution, or does he view it purely as a business asset that must justify its existence through profitability? The stakes could not be higher. The United States is entering a critical period. The Trump administration is in its 2nd year, and the need for aggressive, independent journalism has never been greater. But the institutions capable of providing that journalism are under siege. The Washington Post, which once stood as a bulwark against government overreach and corruption, is now struggling to survive. If it continues to shrink, if it continues to lose the journalists who have made it great, then the public loses a vital check on power. There is also a human cost that cannot be measured in subscriber numbers or profit margins. 300 journalists lost their jobs on Wednesday. Many of them are mid-career professionals with mortgages, families, and years of experience that may not be easily transferable to other industries. The journalism job market is brutal right now, with layoffs occurring across the industry. Some of these journalists will land on their feet at other outlets. Others will leave the profession entirely, taking with them decades of institutional knowledge and expertise. One detail that has gone largely underreported is the reaction from journalists at other major news organizations. Reporters and editors at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and other outlets have expressed shock and solidarity with their Post colleagues. There is a growing sense in the industry that what is happening at the Post could happen anywhere. If Jeff Bezos, one of the richest people on earth, is unwilling or unable to sustain a major newspaper, what hope is there for smaller outlets owned by less wealthy individuals or corporations? Another underreported angle is the impact on the Post's coverage of critical global stories. The elimination of the entire Middle East team comes at a moment when the region is in turmoil. Wars are raging in Gaza and Ukraine. Iran is on the brink of developing nuclear weapons. The U.S. is navigating complex diplomatic and military challenges that require informed reporting. The Post will no longer have the staff to provide that reporting at the level it once did. Readers will have fewer sources of reliable information, and policymakers will have less accountability. There is also the question of what this means for Jeff Bezos' other business interests. Bezos owns Amazon, one of the most powerful companies in the world. Amazon has faced antitrust scrutiny, labor disputes, and regulatory challenges. The Post has historically covered Amazon critically, treating it like any other major corporation. But with Bezos cutting the newsroom to the bone and installing a non-journalist as CEO, can the Post still claim editorial independence when it comes to covering its owner's primary business? That question has not been adequately addressed. As this story continues to unfold, the central question remains: can the Washington Post survive? The institution has endured for over a century. It has weathered wars, depressions, technological revolutions, and political upheavals. But it has never faced a crisis quite like this one, where the decisions being made at the top seem designed to hollow it out rather than save it. Will Lewis is gone, but the problems he leaves behind are monumental. For now, the newsroom is in shock. Journalists who survived the cuts are dealing with survivors' guilt and uncertainty about their own futures. Those who were laid off are scrambling to find new jobs in an industry with few openings. And the readers, the millions of people who have relied on the Washington Post for trustworthy information, are left to wonder whether the newspaper they love will still exist in a few years, or whether it will become another casualty of the digital age and billionaire ownership. If you care about what's happening to American journalism, make sure you're subscribed to The Capital Truth so you never miss critical stories like this. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay informed about the news that truly matters. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Jeff Bezos can save the Washington Post, or is this the beginning of the end for one of America's greatest newspapers? Should billionaires own major news outlets, or does it create too many conflicts of interest? Hit the like button if you think this story deserves more attention, and share this video so others can understand what's really happening behind the headlines. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next breaking news update.